Welcome to Room 101 at Harrigan Compound West. It's story time. So this week I'm trying a little bit of Baren's Acadian Perique in a Paronelli pipe, something I've had kicking around. This pipe has been in the house for so long that I have no recollection of how I even got it. It just seems always to have been here. Anyway, the Acadian Perique is interesting, right? Because I'd never really thought about it all that much until on one of the many online pipe discussion boards, a bunch of people were saying how it was being discontinued and we'd never be able to get it again. So of course I looked up and said, well, I must buy 300 tins of this. I talked myself all the way down to one, which I think is probably for the best, given that it's a little underwhelming, to tell you the truth. Nonetheless, we'll see how it works as I think my way through this week's story, which is a combination of stories brought together under one roof. We'll be talking about all of the various times that I injured myself for no good reason. I mean, I wonder if there is ever a good reason to injure oneself, but I've got some examples where there were no good reasons. And I think it unearths a pattern of behavior on my part that, were I a wiser man, I probably would have tried to address at some point. Now, I'm sure some of you remember when I told you the story of when my eye came out. If not, you might want to dig through those back episodes to find that one. But it got me thinking about these other things I had done. And it started early, as is the case with most lousy habits. I remember I was about 12 years old, and I went to visit my good friend, Kevin McEwen. He was living in Houston, Texas. It was very far away from Connecticut, where I was born and grew up. And I flew down by myself, which was a real fiasco. Right? The airlines didn't know how to treat a minor flying on his own, but we made it work, and I got there. And one of the first days I was there, Kevin pulled me into his room and he said, "Look at this." And he opened a drawer to his dresser, and underneath all of his t-shirts were illicit bottle rockets that he had found somewhere for purchase to a 12-year-old boy. And this was the mother lode, considering the usual kinds of things we were able to get our hands on. And we slipped out that night after dinner to go shoot off said bottle rockets. And we found a can, not a bottle, and that's going to become pivotal in about 1 second. And we were putting the bottle rockets into the can, the soda can, and shooting them off, and they would go. It was a little breezy, something we didn't think twice about at the moment. But we put one of the bottle rockets in, and we lit it on fire. And don't you know, just as it was about to take off, the breeze came and knocked the can over. And it knocked the can over in such a way that it pointed right at me. And here comes the bottle rocket. And you could see it coming. Everything's in slow motion at this point, of course, because you know the disaster that's about to happen and you're powerless to stop it. And in it came, and I felt it lodge in the crease between my eye and my nose, where it promptly exploded. Now, I can't say that it hurt. It didn't really hurt. But I fell backwards, of course, and I got up and dusted myself off and realized that I was having a good bit of trouble seeing out of my right eye. It was a touch blurry at the moment. So we snuck back to the house, and we went in through the back door, and I ran upstairs before his mother could stop us. And I got into the bathroom, and I looked exactly like a cartoon character with a big giant black spot over half my face where the thing had exploded. And we scrubbed and we scrubbed. And by the time we got it off my skin, which took some time, and by the time I was done, I could almost see right again. So we figured, okay, no harm, no foul. And oddly, that's going to be the best of the parts of this story. The rest of them are even more severe. So fast forward to my adult life, after the eye story, but before what comes next. So I'll take them temporally. I was sitting in a house I lived in Utah. And I have a lot of wristwatches. I'm a big fan of watches. It's strange right now that I don't have one on. I almost always do, even when I'm kicking around the house. But I had just gotten one in the mail. And I was trying to get the bracelet sized, because you have to take a couple of links out and you want it to work. So you have to take a couple out from each side to keep it symmetrical and what have you. And I'm sitting at the desk, and I've got a little tiny screwdriver, and I'm pushing at it and pushing at it and pushing at it. But it wasn't working. So I decided in and what has to be one of the dumbest decisions I've ever made, that what I really wanted to do was to take the bracelet in my fingers like this and push on an extended screwdriver, thusly pushing the pins out on top. Because you just have to get them out a little way and then you can reach in and pull them right out. So this is what I started to do, except these pins were so strong. They seemed to have a mind of their own. They weren't coming through at all. So I pushed down harder and harder and harder until, as I was shaking from exerting the force, the screwdriver kicked off like this a little bit. And as I was pushing down on it, my hand missed, and the screwdriver entered my thumb here and exited it here. And I was right in front of a fluorescent light. And I tend to hate these things. It makes me feel like I'm in surgery. But I picked up my thumb like this, and I could see the shank had gone all the way through. And I could see my bone in the light, and it was making a perfect T with that screwdriver. And here's where it gets kind of funny. I screamed, as you might imagine, because it hurt really, really badly. And I got my thumb down and I pulled the screwdriver out, and it was a new screwdriver, and the shank had been bathed in motor oil for reasons I will never understand. And for the next 2 years or so, I had a little spot on either side of my thumb where the oil had collected when it went through my thumb. The next morning, came out to get my morning coffee, and the wife looked at me and said, "What was all that screaming last night?" I said, "You heard it?" And she said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, why didn't you come?" And she said, "I figured you'd be all right." And there it was, which makes this next part of the story, I think, sadder even than it has to be, because I finally moved to Pennsylvania, where we lived for about 10 years, living in Latrobe, birthplace of Arnold Palmer and Mr. Rogers. What were the odds? The man who swore the most in the world and the man who swore the least in the world, as I've come to understand them. And my parents are visiting, and they're in the guest room. And I wake up at about 4:30 in the morning, and I'm just thirsty to beat the band. So I get up and I wander out the way you do when you want to drink, and all the bedrooms were up on the top floor. And I get to the staircase, and I start to walk down to get a drink of water from the kitchen. And don't you know, I missed the very first step. And when you miss the first one, it's a long way down. And I tumbled end over end all the way down the stairs, coming into a lifeless heap at the bottom. And as I was laying there, you lay there a little longer, right, to take stock of what has happened and maybe figure out if you can even walk again and this sort of thing. And as I was laying there at the bottom, I saw the wife's silhouette come to the top of the stairs, peering down at me. And she just turned left and went back to bed. And I'm thinking, well, that's a hell of a note right there. Why don't you come see if I'm all right? But no, that wasn't going to happen. She did bring it up the next day. And I said the same thing I said back in the house in Utah. Why are you not coming down to see me? And she said the exact same thing. She said, "I figured you're all right." So I guess what we've learned is that I am prone to hurting myself. The wife is prone to finding out about it and letting it go. And there's really no wisdom to be found here in any way, shape, or form. I did, when I moved to Arizona, where I now sit and talk to you, I did buy a house without a stair in it. There's not one step in this entire house. So falling down the stairs is mercifully not open for renewal. As for the rest of it, who knows? I'm not sizing watch bracelets so much anymore. I tend to just use a NATO strap, so we get around that problem. But I'm sure before too long, we're going to have some other horrible thing that befalls me, and I'll tell you all about it when it happens. As far as the pipe goes, Acadian Perique, not that interesting, come to find out. Now I no longer care if they pull it from production. I won't buy a lot to stock up on, and I wonder why I even bought this much. I'm going to have to smoke my way through it, I guess. But we'll have lots of time to do that, given that there's no more coming. I have to say, in the past week, one of the people who watch these things, Mary, my friend Mary, sent me this lovely candle, a candle scented as pipe tobacco. And actually, it's not far off. It's actually a pretty good approximation of what pipe tobacco smells like. So there it is. Thanks to Mary, and the rest of you better get up on your game a little better.
Harrigan, spells Harrigan, proud of all the Irish blood that's in me.
Of course, now when I think about how I hurt myself, the stakes have gotten quite low, comparatively speaking. Every time I open a window, or that I sneeze, or that I cough, I get the feeling that I'm about to throw something out in my back again. And, you know, when this is what you think of when you think of self-injury, it's just not that funny anymore, right? There's something about a screwdriver crashing straight through your thumb that's a whole lot funnier than throwing your back out and not being able to walk for 2 weeks because you opened the window from an uncentered position. Anyway, I'm guessing something will happen soon enough, and perhaps we can bring that to you as it happens. Catch y'all next week.